Commander Jake Morrison sat in his captain's chair aboard the UES Aurora, watching the stars drift by through the main view screen. The patrol mission had been routine so far, nothing more exciting than checking navigation beacons and scanning for space debris along the outer rim trade routes. His crew of 47 men and women had settled into the familiar rhythm of deep space duty, monitoring their instruments and maintaining the ship's systems while traveling through the vast emptiness between star systems. The Aurora was not the largest ship in the human fleet, but she was reliable and well-equipped for her role as a patrol vessel. Her sleek hull cut through space with quiet efficiency, powered by fusion engines that had carried them faithfully for 3 years of service. Morrison had commanded her for most of that time, and he knew every sound she made, every vibration that traveled through her decks. That was why he noticed immediately when Chief Communications Officer Lisa Carter looked up from her station with a puzzled expression on her face. Carter was young but experienced, having served on deep space missions for 5 years before joining the Aurora's crew. She had short brown hair and sharp green eyes that rarely missed anything unusual in the communication channels she monitored. "Commander, I'm picking up something strange on the long-range sensors," Carter said, adjusting the controls at her station. "It's definitely artificial, but not in any format I recognize from our databases." Morrison turned his attention to her, feeling the first stirring of interest he had experienced in weeks. "Can you clean it up enough to make sense of it?" Carter's fingers moved quickly across her console, applying various filters and enhancement protocols to the signal. "It's very weak, sir, and definitely not human in origin. The frequency patterns are completely unlike anything we use for our own communications, but there's definitely structure to it, like it's trying to convey information." Navigation Officer Pete Nelson looked up from his own station, where he had been monitoring their course through this empty region of space. "Commander, whatever is sending that signal, it's coming from coordinates about 4 light hours away from our current position. There's nothing on our charts for that area, no known systems or inhabited worlds." Morrison stood up from his chair and walked over to Carter's station, looking at the complex waveforms displayed on her screen. The signal was indeed unlike anything he had seen before, with patterns that seemed almost musical in their complexity. But beneath the alien structure, he could sense something that made his stomach tighten with concern. "Lisa, does this look like any kind of automated beacon to you?" he asked. Carter frowned as she studied the display more carefully. "Now that you mention it, sir, there is a repetitive element to the transmission. It's not random noise or casual communication. This looks like something that's designed to repeat the same message over and over again." Morrison felt his pulse quicken. "Like a distress signal." "That's exactly what I was thinking, Commander," Carter replied. "The pattern repeats every 47 seconds, which is consistent with emergency beacon protocols, even if the format is completely unknown to us." Morrison walked back to his command chair, his mind racing through the implications. First contact with an alien species had always been a theoretical possibility, something discussed in military academies and debated by scientists and politicians. But the reality of potentially encountering non-human intelligence was both thrilling and terrifying. "Carter, how long would it take you to decode that signal?" he asked. "Hard to say, sir. Without any reference points for their language or communication methods, it could take hours or days. But if it really is a distress signal, there might be universal elements that I can identify, like numerical sequences or basic mathematical relationships." Morrison nodded thoughtfully. He needed to contact his superior officer, Captain Ryan Phillips, who commanded the small patrol group that included the Aurora. Phillips was stationed aboard the UES Defender, currently 3 days away at maximum speed. But this situation might not wait for Phillips to arrive. "Nelson, plot a course for those coordinates," Morrison ordered. "Best possible speed without straining the engines." "Yes, sir," Nelson replied, his hands moving over his navigation console. Course laid in. "At current speed, we'll reach the signal source in approximately 6 hours. Morrison activated his command communicator. "All department heads report to the briefing room in 10 minutes. We have a situation that requires immediate attention." As his senior staff assembled in the briefing room, Morrison explained what they had discovered. Chief Engineer Danny Cole, a stocky man with graying hair and 30 years of experience in space, listened with growing excitement. Security Chief Alex Turner, a former military police officer with a cautious nature, looked increasingly concerned as Morrison described the unknown signal. "Commander, I have to advise caution here," Turner said when Morrison finished his briefing. "We have no idea what we're dealing with. This could be anything from a genuine distress call to some kind of trap or weapon system." Medical Officer Dr. Karen White, a calm woman in her 40s who had served on several deep space missions, nodded in agreement. "Alex has a point, Jake. We're not equipped for first contact situations. We don't have the proper protocols or the scientific staff to handle something like this safely." Morrison looked around the table at his officers. These were good people, experienced and reliable, but they were facing something completely outside their normal duties. "I understand your concerns and I share them. But if there are intelligent beings out there in distress, can we really just ignore them and continue on our patrol route?" Cole leaned forward in his chair. "Commander, I've been monitoring that signal while we've been talking. The transmission strength is getting weaker. Whatever is sending it, the power source is failing. If we're going to investigate, we need to do it soon." Morrison made his decision. "We proceed to investigate, but with full caution. Turner, I want all defensive systems ready but not active. We approach slowly and observe before we take any action. Carter, keep working on that signal. If you can decode even part of it, that might tell us what we're dealing with." As the meeting broke up and his officers returned to their stations, Morrison remained in the briefing room for a few minutes, staring out at the stars through the small porthole. In a few hours, they might be making first contact with an alien species. The thought was both exciting and terrifying, but Morrison knew they had no choice but to respond to what appeared to be a call for help. The Aurora changed course and accelerated toward the unknown signal, carrying her crew toward an encounter that would change everything they thought they knew about humanity's place in the universe. The Aurora dropped out of faster-than-light travel with a gentle shudder that ran through her hull. Commander Morrison felt his breath catch in his throat as the main view screen flickered to life and revealed what lay ahead of them. 17 ships hung motionless in the void, their sleek crystalline hulls catching and reflecting the distant starlight like frozen tears suspended in space. The alien vessels were unlike anything Morrison had ever seen or imagined. Where human ships were built with straight lines and angular surfaces designed for efficiency and function, these craft seemed to flow like liquid metal that had been shaped by an artist's hand. Their hulls were translucent in places, revealing internal structures that pulsed with faint bioluminescent light. The largest ship was easily 3 times the size of the Aurora, while the smallest were still larger than any human fighter craft. "My God," whispered Navigation Officer Pete Nelson from his station. "They're beautiful." Morrison had to agree, but his trained eye also noticed the signs of distress. Several of the ships showed obvious damage along their hulls, with dark sections where the internal lighting had failed. They drifted without power. No engine signatures detected by the Aurora's sensors. The distress signal was coming from the largest vessel, its transmission growing weaker with each repetition. "Carter, any progress on decoding that signal?" Morrison asked. Lisa Carter looked up from her console where she had been working frantically for the past 6 hours. "I think I've made a breakthrough, Commander. The mathematical sequences in the transmission match universal constants like pi and the speed of light. Once I used those as reference points, I was able to start identifying other elements. I'm pretty sure they're trying to tell us about engine failures and life support problems." Morrison nodded grimly. "Open a channel on all standard frequencies. Let's see if we can establish communication." Carter activated the communication array and began transmitting a simple mathematical sequence, followed by basic pictograms that showed the Aurora approaching peacefully. For several long minutes, there was no response except for the continued repetition of the distress signal. Then suddenly, the alien transmission changed. "Commander, they're responding," Carter said excitedly. "The pattern has shifted, and they're incorporating elements from our transmission into their signal. They're definitely intelligent, and they understand that we're trying to communicate." Over the next hour, Carter worked with the alien ship to establish a basic communication protocol. Using mathematics and simple pictograms, both sides began to exchange basic information. The aliens identified themselves with a symbol that roughly translated to what Carter called the Valerian Republic. They confirmed that their ships had suffered catastrophic engine failures and that their life support systems were failing. Morrison made the decision to move closer to the alien fleet, bringing the Aurora within 1 kilometer of the largest vessel. Through the view screen, they could see movement through the translucent sections of the alien hull, shadowy figures moving with obvious urgency. "Sir, I'm detecting an incoming transmission," Carter announced. "It's much more complex than what we've been exchanging so far. I think they're trying to establish voice communication. The speakers crackled with static, and then a voice emerged, speaking in a language that sounded like wind chimes mixed with the sound of breaking glass. Carter quickly ran the transmission through the translation protocol she had been developing, and slowly, words began to form on her screen. Greetings, unknown beings. The translation read, I am Admiral Zethkar of the Valerian Republic Navy. Your arrival brings hope to our desperate situation. We have been stranded here for many cycles with no response from our own people. Morrison stepped forward toward the communication station. Carter, can you translate my response? I think so, sir. The system is getting better at converting between our languages. Morrison spoke clearly and slowly. Admiral Zethkar, I am Commander Jake Morrison of the human starship Aurora. We received your distress signal and came to offer assistance. What is your situation? There was a long pause before the alien response came through. You are not Valerian, yet you came to help us. This is unexpected. Our fleet encountered what you might call a subspace storm while traveling between star systems. The storm damaged our exotic matter drives beyond repair. We have been drifting here for what you would measure as 4 months. Our life support systems are failing, and many of my people are injured. Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. 4 months stranded in space with failing life support was a death sentence for any crew. Admiral, we want to help you, but we need to understand your technology and your people's needs. Can we send a team aboard your ship to assess the situation? The pause was even longer this time. When Admiral Zethkar responded, his voice carried notes that the translation system interpreted as both hope and suspicion. You would risk your own people to help strangers. This is difficult for us to understand. In our experience, most species seek advantage over others, not to offer aid freely. But we are desperate, Commander Morrison. We will accept your offer. Morrison turned to his chief engineer. Danny, take a team over to their ship. Full environmental suits until we know their atmosphere is safe for us. I want a complete assessment of their damage and what we might be able to do to help. Chief Engineer Danny Cole nodded, his weathered face showing the excitement of a man about to examine completely alien technology. I'll take Wilson from the engine room and Stevens from electronics. We should be able to get a good picture of what they're dealing with. As Cole's team prepared for the dangerous mission of boarding an alien vessel, Dr. Karen White approached Morrison. Commander, I should go with them. If their people are injured, I might be able to help, even if their biology is completely different from ours. Morrison considered this carefully. It's risky, Karen. We have no idea what their atmosphere is like or whether our medical techniques would even apply to their physiology. That's exactly why I need to go, Dr. White replied. We won't know unless we try, and if they're really dying over there, we have to attempt something. Morrison watched through the view screen as the Aurora's shuttlecraft approached the alien vessel. A section of the crystalline hull dilated open like an iris, revealing a docking bay that pulsed with soft blue light. The shuttle disappeared inside, carrying the first human beings ever to set foot aboard an alien starship. 30 minutes later, Cole's voice crackled over the communication system. Commander, you're not going to believe what we're seeing over here. Their technology is incredible, but it's completely fried. The storm overloaded every system they have. However, their crew members are silicon-based life forms, not carbon-based like us, but Dr. White thinks she can help treat their injuries. Morrison felt a mixture of amazement and determination. Humanity was about to attempt the first rescue of an alien species in their history, and they were going to do everything possible to save these stranded travelers. Chief Engineer Danny Cole stood in the main engineering section of the Valerian flagship, staring at technology that seemed to bend the laws of physics as he understood them. The chamber around him hummed with a low crystalline tone, and surfaces that looked like living metal pulsed with patterns of light that changed as he watched. Everything was alien, from the curved walls that seemed to grow rather than be built, to the control interfaces that responded to touch with musical chimes. Beside him, Subcommander Veltar gestured with 4 graceful arms toward the massive engine assembly that dominated the center of the chamber. The Valerian officer stood nearly 7 feet tall, his silicon-based body resembling a living sculpture made of translucent blue-green crystal. When he spoke, his voice produced harmonics that the translation device rendered into accented but understandable English. The exotic matter containment matrix was overloaded when we encountered the subspace storm. Veltar explained, his crystalline features showing what Cole had learned to recognize as deep frustration. The feedback destroyed the quantum stabilizers and collapsed our dimensional fold generators. Without these systems, our ships cannot move faster than light, and our conventional drives were damaged beyond repair. Cole nodded slowly, trying to wrap his mind around concepts that were decades ahead of human science. So you're saying your engines use some kind of controlled exotic matter to fold space around your ships? A crude explanation, but essentially accurate, Veltar replied. Your species still uses fusion and matter-antimatter reactions for propulsion, correct? Such primitive methods, yet you crossed the void to help us. This is puzzling to my people. Cole had heard similar comments from several Valerian officers over the past 2 days. They seemed genuinely confused by humanity's willingness to help, as if the concept of altruism toward strangers was foreign to their culture. But their confusion didn't stop them from working alongside. The human engineering teams that had arrived aboard the USS Liberty. Captain Tony Martinez had brought his ship and its crew of specialists. As soon as Commander Morrison's message reached Human Command, the Liberty carried advanced manufacturing equipment and a team of engineers led by Chief Engineer Susan Clark, a brilliant woman who had spent her career solving impossible technical problems. Together, the crews of both human ships were attempting something that had never been tried before, creating hybrid technology that could get the Valerian fleet moving again. Danny, come look at this, called Gary Thompson from across the engine chamber. The mechanical specialist was working with another Valerian engineer, examining a component that looked like a sphere of liquid mercury suspended in a cage of light beams. I think I understand how their power distribution system works. It's not electricity like ours, it's some kind of coherent energy field that flows through their ships like blood through veins. Cole walked over to join Thompson, marveling at how the human and alien engineers had found ways to communicate, despite the vast differences in their technology. The Valerians were clearly more advanced, but they approached problems with a methodical precision that sometimes missed creative solutions. Humans, on the other hand, had a talent for improvisation that seemed to fascinate their alien counterparts. The problem is power generation, Thompson continued. Their exotic matter engines didn't just move the ships, they provided all the energy for life support, weapons, and every other system. With those engines dead, they're running on emergency power that's almost exhausted. Cole studied the alien power distribution node, noting how it interfaced with systems throughout the ship. What if we could adapt our fusion reactors to provide power to their systems? It wouldn't be elegant, but it might keep them alive until we figure out how to fix their engines. Veltar's crystalline form brightened with what Cole had learned was the Valerian equivalent of excitement. Your fusion reactors produce energy in forms our systems could potentially use. The conversion would be inefficient, but it might work as a temporary solution. Over the next several hours, Cole and Thompson worked with the Valerian engineers to design power coupling systems that could connect human fusion reactors to alien energy distribution networks. The work required both species to share technical knowledge they had never revealed to outsiders before, creating a level of trust that surprised everyone involved. Meanwhile, aboard the Aurora, Dr. Karen White was making her own breakthrough in understanding Valerian physiology. The alien medical bay was a chamber filled with crystalline devices that sang with different tones as they worked. Dr. White had been working alongside healer Zarnan, the Valerian equivalent of a chief medical officer, treating injured crew members from the fleet. Your technique with the bone resonance therapy is quite effective, Zarnan commented as they worked on a Valerian engineer whose crystalline arm structure had been fractured during the storm. We had not considered using harmonic frequencies in that manner. Dr. White smiled as she adjusted the human medical scanner she had modified to work with Valerian physiology. And your cellular regeneration methods are incredible. If we could adapt some of your techniques for human medicine, we could eliminate most forms of permanent injury. The cooperation between the medical teams had been one of the most successful aspects of the rescue operation. Despite the vast differences between silicon-based and carbon-based life forms, both species shared similar concepts of medicine and healing. Dr. White had discovered that many human medical techniques, when properly adapted, could help injured Valerians recover faster. Dr. White, came Commander Morrison's voice over the communication system. How are our patients doing? Better than expected, Commander, Dr. White replied. We've managed to stabilize the most critical cases, and healer Zarnan has taught me techniques that I think could revolutionize human medicine. The exchange of knowledge has been beneficial for both our species. Back in the engine chamber, Chief Engineer Susan Clark arrived with a team of technicians carrying components from the Liberty's manufacturing bay. She had been working around the clock to design and build the power coupling systems that might save the Valerian fleet. "We've got the first prototype ready for testing," Clark announced as her team began installing the human-built interface device. "It's not pretty, but it should allow us to route power from our fusion reactors directly into their distribution system." Admiral Zethkar arrived to observe the test, accompanied by Commander Morrison and several officers from both species. The Valerian admiral had been working closely with the human commanders, and Morrison had developed a deep respect for the alien officer's dedication to his people. "If this works," Morrison said to Admiral Zethkar, "we should be able to provide enough power to keep your life support systems running while we work on a more permanent solution for your engines, Admiral." Zethkar's crystalline features showed gratitude mixed with amazement. "Commander Morrison, your people continue to surprise us. Most species we have encountered would have demanded something in return for such assistance. Yet you ask for nothing," Morrison smiled. "Admiral, helping people in distress is just the right thing to do. When this is over, maybe our species can learn from each other and both become stronger." The power coupling test began, and slowly, light returned to sections of the Valerian ship that had been dark for months. Chief Engineer Susan Clark wiped sweat from her forehead as she stepped back from the massive hybrid engine assembly that her team had been building for the past 3 weeks. The device looked like something from a mad scientist's laboratory, with human antimatter containment units connected to salvaged Valerian exotic matter processors through a maze of cables and energy conduits. It was not elegant, but if her calculations were correct, it would provide enough power to get the alien fleet moving again. "The theoretical framework is sound," said Veltar, studying the readings on his crystalline display device. "Your antimatter technology, while primitive by our standards, produces energy patterns that our systems can use. The conversion efficiency is only 30%, but that should be sufficient for basic propulsion." Clark nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and exhaustion. Her entire engineering team had worked around the clock to make this hybrid system possible, learning alien technology while teaching the Valerians about human engineering principles. The cooperation had been remarkable, but she knew they were racing against time. The Valerian life support systems were failing faster than they could repair them, even with the temporary power from human fusion reactors. Commander Morrison stood nearby, watching the final preparations with Admiral Zethkar. The two commanders had developed a strong working relationship over the past weeks, sharing meals and stories about their respective cultures. Morrison had learned that the Valerians were an ancient spacefaring civilization that had rarely encountered other intelligent species, and when they did, those encounters usually involved conflict or competition rather than cooperation. "Commander, I'm detecting multiple contacts on long-range sensors," announced Lieutenant Bobby Harris from his station aboard the Aurora. His voice carried a note of concern that made Morrison's stomach tighten. 7 ships, definitely Valerian design, approaching at high speed. Admiral Zethkar's crystalline features shifted through patterns that Morrison had learned indicated surprise and worry. "That will be Fleet Admiral Carthex with the rescue fleet. They must have finally received our distress signals and traced our location." Morrison felt relief wash over him. "That's good news, Admiral. Your people have come to help with the rescue operation." But Admiral Zethkar's expression grew darker, the light patterns in his crystalline body shifting to colors that Morrison associated with deep concern. "Commander, I fear you do not understand the situation. Fleet Admiral Carthex represents the old faction in our government, those who believe that contact with other species brings only danger and contamination. He will not view your assistance favorably." Before Morrison could ask what that meant, Lisa Carter's voice crackled over the communication system from the Aurora. "Commander, we're receiving a transmission from the approaching Valerian fleet. It's being broadcast on all frequencies, and it doesn't sound friendly." Morrison and Admiral Zethkar quickly returned to the Aurora's bridge, where Carter had the alien transmission displayed on the main screen. The translation system had improved dramatically over the past weeks, and the message was clear and threatening. "Unknown alien vessels. You are ordered to withdraw from this area immediately," the message declared. "You are interfering with Valerian Republic internal affairs. Any attempt to board or examine our ships will be considered an act of war." Morrison stared at the screen in disbelief. Admiral, they're treating us like invaders, not rescuers. Admiral Zethkar moved to the communication station, his forearms working quickly to compose a response. Fleet Admiral Carthex, this is Admiral Zethkar commanding the stranded fleet. These humans responded to our distress signals and have been providing aid for several weeks. They have saved many lives and are helping us repair our ships. The response came quickly, and Morrison could hear the anger in the alien commander's harmonious voice even through the translation system. Admiral Zethkar, you have violated primary protocols by allowing aliens access to our technology and ships. You will order these creatures to withdraw immediately, and you will prepare to transfer command to me for disciplinary action. Morrison felt his hands clench into fists. After weeks of cooperation and friendship, being called a creature was particularly insulting. But he forced himself to remain calm, knowing that any aggressive response would only make the situation worse. Admiral, Morrison said quietly to Zethkar, what are the chances that your fleet admiral will listen to reason? Zethkar's crystalline body dimmed with what Morrison now recognized as sadness. Very small, Commander. Carthex has always believed that other species are inferior and potentially dangerous. He sees your help as weakness. On our part and contamination by your influence, the situation became more tense when security. Chief Alex Turner reported that the approaching Valerian ships were powering up their weapon systems. Long-range scans showed that the rescue fleet was heavily armed with exotic energy weapons that could easily destroy both human ships. Commander, we're outnumbered and outgunned, Turner said grimly. If they decide to attack, we won't last 5 minutes against those weapons. Morrison considered his options. He could order the Aurora and Liberty to withdraw, leaving the Valerians to sort out their own political problems. But that would mean abandoning Admiral Zethkar and his crew, who had become friends and allies over the past weeks. It would also mean giving up on the repairs they had almost completed. Carter, open a channel to Fleet Admiral Carthex, Morrison ordered. I want to speak to him directly. The alien commander's image appeared on the main screen, and Morrison could see immediately why Admiral Zethkar was concerned. Where Zethkar's crystalline features showed warmth and intelligence, Carthex radiated cold authority and suspicion. His body was larger and more angular than the other Valerians Morrison had met, and the light patterns flowing through his crystalline structure were harsh and aggressive. I am Commander Jake Morrison of the human starship Aurora, Morrison said formally. We responded to a distress signal from Admiral Zethkar's fleet and have been providing humanitarian aid. We seek no conflict with your people. Carthex studied Morrison with eyes that glowed like cold fire. Human Commander, your species is unknown to us and unknown species are dangerous. You will withdraw from this area and never return, or face the consequences. Morrison took a deep breath, knowing that his next words could determine whether this first contact between humans and Valerians ended in friendship or war. Fleet Admiral, we came here only to help. We've spent weeks working alongside your people, sharing knowledge and saving lives. Admiral Zethkar can tell you that our intentions are peaceful. Admiral Zethkar has been compromised by exposure to your influence, Carthex replied coldly. He is no longer fit to command. You have 10 minutes to withdraw before we open fire. As the transmission ended, Morrison realized that they faced an impossible choice. They could flee and abandon their new allies, or they could stay and risk starting an interstellar war between two species that had just begun to understand each other. Admiral Zethkar stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the tactical display that showed Fleet Admiral Carthex's warships surrounding the small human vessels. The countdown to the ultimatum was down to 3 minutes, and Zethkar knew he had to make the most important decision of his life. Around him, his bridge crew waited in tense silence, their crystalline faces reflecting the internal struggle their commander was facing. Commander Morrison's voice came through the communication system, calm despite the desperate situation. Admiral Zethkar, we're prepared to withdraw if that's what you think is best. We don't want to cause problems between your people. Zethkar felt something that his people rarely experienced, something the humans had taught him over the past weeks of working together. It was a feeling that had no direct translation in his language, but the humans called it loyalty to friends. These strange beings had risked their lives to help strangers, asking nothing in return, and now they were willing to sacrifice themselves rather than cause conflict among the Valerians. Sub-Commander Veltar, Zethkar said to his engineering officer, Activate all ship systems. Bring our weapons online and move us between the human ships and Carthex's fleet. Veltar's crystalline features showed shock. Admiral, you're giving orders that could be considered mutiny against a superior officer. No, Zethkar replied firmly. I'm protecting beings who saved our lives. Move us into position now. Across the fleet, other Valerian ship commanders faced the same choice. Captain Mordek of the cruiser Starweaver was the first to follow Zethkar's lead, moving his ship to shield the Aurora. Captain Linara of the science vessel, Thoughtbearer, quickly joined them, followed by 4 more ships from the stranded fleet. Fleet Admiral Carthex's voice thundered across all communication channels. Admiral Zethkar, stand down immediately. You are in violation of direct orders and endangering the security of the Valerian Republic. Zethkar activated his ship's communication array and broadcast on all frequencies, so that every Valerian in both fleets could hear his words. Fleet Admiral Carthex, these humans crossed the void to help us when we were dying. They shared their technology, their food, and their medical knowledge without asking for anything in return. They worked day and night to save our lives while our own people ignored our distress signals for months. Commander Morrison made his own decision in that moment. Instead of trying to flee or prepare for battle, he activated the Aurora's communication system and addressed the Valerian rescue fleet directly. His words were translated and broadcast across both fleets, reaching every Valerian ear. I am Commander Jake Morrison of the human species, he began, his voice steady and clear. 3 weeks ago, we heard your people calling for help across the darkness of space. We came because that's what we believe intelligent beings should do for each other. We've learned that your technology is far more advanced than ours. You could easily destroy our ships if you wanted to, but we didn't come here to fight or to steal your secrets. We came because Admiral Zethkar's people were dying, and we couldn't ignore that. Morrison paused, letting his words sink in before continuing. In our short time working together, we've learned that Valerians and humans are not so different. We both value the lives of our crews. We both feel pain when our friends are hurt. We both want our children to have a better future than we did. Your Admiral Zethkar and his people have taught us that intelligence and compassion can exist together in the universe. I hope that our species can learn from each other and build something better than either of us could create alone. The communication channels fell silent for long moments as Morrison's words echoed through both fleets. Then unexpectedly, Captain Zorith of Carthex's own flagship spoke up on the open channel. Fleet Admiral, I've been reviewing the tactical logs from Admiral Zethkar's ships. The humans did indeed respond to our distress signals when our own rescue fleet failed to locate them. They've provided medical aid, technical assistance, and resource support that saved hundreds of Valerian lives. More voices joined the discussion as other ship commanders from Carthex's fleet began to question their orders. Captain Velshan of the battlecruiser Starhammer reported that his sensors showed clear evidence of successful cooperation between human and Valerian engineering teams. Captain Bornix of the destroyer Winddancer noted that the hybrid power systems the humans had built were actually keeping the stranded ships operational. Fleet Admiral Carthex found himself facing something he had never encountered before: open disagreement from his own commanders. The rigid hierarchy that had always defined Valerian military culture was cracking under the weight of evidence that challenged their fundamental beliefs about other species. Chief Engineer Susan Clark chose that moment to activate the hybrid engine system her teams had been building. The test was successful beyond all expectations, and one of the stranded Valerian ships suddenly blazed with power as its systems came back online. The sight of a dead ship returning to life was visible to both fleets, proving that human technology could indeed help save Valerian lives. Admiral Zethkar seized the moment. Fleet Admiral Carthex, I formally request that we establish diplomatic relations with the human species. They've proven that cooperation between our peoples is not only possible, but beneficial. They've saved lives, shared knowledge, and asked for nothing in return except the chance to help. The standoff continued for several more tense minutes as Carthex weighed his options. He was outnumbered by his own fleet, many of whom were now questioning orders that would result in attacking the very beings who had saved Valerian lives. The political ramifications of starting a war over a rescue operation would be devastating to his career and his faction's influence. Finally, Carthex's voice came over the communication system, stiff with reluctant acceptance. Admiral Zethkar, You will accompany me back to the homeworlds to face inquiry for your actions. However, the human vessels will be granted safe passage and diplomatic status pending review by the High Council. Commander Morrison felt relief flood through him, but he knew this was just the beginning. Fleet Admiral Carthex, we're honored by your decision. We'd like to propose an exchange of diplomatic representatives so our species can continue to learn from each other. 3 days later, as the combined fleets prepared to depart for Valerian space, Chief Engineer Susan Clark transmitted the complete technical specifications for the hybrid repair systems to the Valerian engineering teams. The gesture was meant to show that humans truly had no hidden agenda in their offer of help. Admiral Zethkar stood on his bridge one final time before transferring to Carthex's flagship for the journey home. Through the view screen, he could see the Aurora preparing to escort the first Valerian diplomatic mission to human space. The sight filled him with something his people had rarely felt before: hope for a future where two very different species could work together for the benefit of both. Commander Morrison recorded his final log entry of the mission as the Aurora set course for Earth. Mission Report Day 22. First contact with the Valerian Republic has been established. We've learned that our greatest strength as a species isn't our technology or our weapons, but our willingness to help others, even strangers from across the galaxy. Today, humanity proved that compassion can cross any distance and bridge any difference.